Shana Tova. One Rosh Hashanah morning, the rabbi noticed little Adam was staring up at a large plaque that hung in the foyer of the synagogue. It was covered with names, and small American flags were mounted on either side of it. The 7-year-old had been staring at the plaque for some time. So the rabbi walked up, stood beside the boy, and said quietly, "Good morning, Adam." "Good morning, Rabbi," replied the young man, still focused on the plaque. "Rabbi Bernstein, what is this?" Adam asked. "Well, it's a memorial to all the young men and women who died in the service." Soberly, they stood together, staring at the large plaque. Little Adam's voice was barely audible when he asked, "Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur?" I share this story because today we once again are invited to wade into one of the most provocative and disturbing stories in all of the Torah, Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. So what is there for us in this story? For a number of years now, I have been thinking more and more about Isaac, clearly the most enigmatic of the 3 patriarchs. In so many of our blessings, we call upon our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And thankfully, in recent times, we include in our blessings the matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Among our spiritual fathers, Abraham is the trailblazer, the boundary crosser, and along with Sarah, the founders of Judaism. There are so many narrative stories, rich, compelling, provocative stories about Abraham. And Jacob, what a remarkable character Jacob is. He struggles with his brother Esav and makes off with Esav's birthright. He falls in love with Rachel, is tricked into marrying her sister Leah, and then ends up marrying Rachel as well, and on and on. These are 2 classic role models. With all of their flaws, they are larger than life sources of inspiration. But what of Isaac? He is radically different than the 2 other Jewish patriarchs, Abraham, his father, and Jacob, his son. There is so much chaos going on around Isaac. He tends to be overlooked. In many ways, he seems almost invisible. He literally disappears after the near-death experience at the hands of his father. When I truly focused on Isaac, pulled together all of the verses that mention him in the Torah, a picture emerged that was quite stunning. So let's look together at what the Torah has to say about Isaac. Well, Isaac is a miracle baby. He's born to Sarah after she has given up ever hoping for a child and is felt to be considerably past childbearing years. She even names him Yitzchak, which comes from the word for laughter. She says, "God has made a mockery of me, giving me a child at such an old age. Everyone who hears about it will laugh at me." The great medieval Torah commentator Rashi thinks that Sarah's laughter signified joy, but the Torah scholar Onkelos joins the ranks of other sages who said her reaction was of ridicule. She certainly seems bitter to me. Why would a woman who has waited all of her life to have a child, has suffered through infertility, be bitter when she finally bears a child? Wouldn't we expect her to be deliriously happy? Why isn't she celebrating and jubilant? What would cause a woman who gives birth at an advanced age to be bitter and despondent? Could it be that there was something wrong with the baby? Could it have been that Isaac was born developmentally disabled? The next big event is, of course, today's deeply disturbing text, the near sacrifice of Isaac. Many commentators understand this text as a cautionary tale against child sacrifice. However, we do know that the most common cause of child sacrifice in the ancient world was when children were seen to be unhealthy or disabled. It was felt that their chance of survival was poor, and few families could afford the burden of a child who was compromised in this way. What if Abraham went up on that mountain to do what other parents did who had disabled children? Maybe he was going to end Isaac's life, and in the primitive thinking of the ancient world, spare everyone a lot of misery. In this story, Isaac is not a little boy. He is, at best, overly obedient, if not simple. He asks his father, "Father, where is the lamb for the offering?" And Abraham responds, "God will provide us the lamb." How is it that Isaac allows himself to be bound on the altar? When exactly does it dawn upon him that he is the sacrifice? And why doesn't he get it sooner? And why doesn't he protest? How much more powerful does this story become if Abraham looked into the eyes of his child and decided to brook the contemporary convention and save this special young person? If we maintain this thesis, we can much better understand why Isaac is the only one of the patriarchs who doesn't find a wife on his own. Now, why would this be? Instead, Abraham sends his chief steward, Eliezer, to go to his ancestral village, Nahor, in Mesopotamia, to find a wife for Isaac from among his own kinsmen. Maybe Isaac wasn't capable to find a wife on his own. Both Abraham and Jacob undergo name changes. Avram becomes Avraham when circumcision becomes the sign of the covenant between God and Israel. Jacob becomes Israel when he wrestles with the angel during his own dark night of the soul. Each of these patriarchs undergoes significant transformations, large shifts in identity. Isaac remains Isaac and undergoes no essential growth or change. Even more significantly, unlike his father and son, he achieves no meaningful accomplishments during his lifetime. We move forward to Isaac's final scene. Isaac has decided to bestow the mantle of leadership on his son, Esau. He asks him to hunt some game and prepare one of his favorite feasts. Then Isaac would bestow his blessing, pass on the family inheritance to his firstborn son, Esau. Meanwhile, Isaac's wife, Rebekah, overhears this and enlists Jacob, Esau's younger twin, in a plan to deceive Isaac and steal the inheritance. Why does Rebekah feel the need to manipulate Isaac? Why does she seem